friends, my name is Dasha. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to today's video, which is going to be a set of book recommendations for the winter season. These are all going to be books that have a bit of a wintry vibe, maybe not books necessarily set during the winter, but that still kind of fit for this season. I did a set of recommendations for my own readathon during which I gave books that had wintry vibes in them. If you'd like a few more recommendations, please go check out that video. It will be linked because one of the prompts was to read a book with wintry vibes. But I will be trying to avoid repeats in this video because I think I've gathered a few more recs since then, and obviously I don't want to just recommend the same books over and over. So if you want a few more, go check that out. But today I've got a nice little set of books that I really want to recommend to you guys. I think you guys would love these for the winter season. Here in Canada, it is already winter. Fall goes by in the blink of an eye. Fall is literally like two and a half months, and then it's winter for like 4 months. So it's winter already. So if it's not winter yet for you, I'm so sorry. For me, it's been snowing. Everything's Christmassy here. So without further ado, let's get right on into it. So I'm gonna start off with one that I think is pretty obvious to me just based on the setting of the book, but that's Moon of the Crested Snow by Waubgeshig Rice. So this is a novel set in an Indigenous community in Northern Ontario where there is a bit of a blackout. Their power lines are all down and so are the phone lines, but they think it's fine, and then they slowly start realizing that they're getting cut off from the outside world, and the outside world might not be doing as well as they think it is, and it is set during the winter. And if you know anything about Ontario winters, especially the more north you go in Ontario, the winters get pretty friggin' brutal. I grew up in Eastern Ontario, which is pretty intense, and it's not even as bad as Northern Ontario or obviously the territories, but we get pretty intense winters. My life has been a series of winters where every few years there would be these massive snowstorms that would just completely halt everything. Just a few years ago, I was worried that we wouldn't even make a flight because we had a snowstorm that same week where the snow literally accumulated to touch the top of the fence around our house, and it's just like, it's scary. And like every few years there's a snowstorm like that. We all have winter tires. We are all very much used to it. My winter attire is not cute, it's not cozy, it's heavy duty. Like, I'm used to Canadian winters, and this book perfectly encapsulated that very eerie, uncomfortable, isolating, overly quiet feeling that the winter gives you. You know, when you're sitting inside and you're watching the snowfall and it's just silent and it's dark, but that sky has that pink hue, and you can just feel like, what if something bad happens? This book was that, literally embodied. It was so fantastically done. This book was a 5-star for me. Like, I thought it was just perfect from start to finish. It is not fast-paced by any means. It is more a slow, creeping sense of dread. And I think if you've lived at all in a harsh winter environment, you would be absolutely terrified by this because it seems so plausible. And I think for me, that's the part that made it like the scariest, was how it could happen, how you get the same feeling standing outside in the winter. Like, if you're up early to take your dog for a walk or something and you're sitting there and you're like, what if the world ended? Like, would I even know right now? Anyways, I thought this was just absolutely breathtaking. It perfectly encapsulates the harshness of winter, in my opinion, and I think it's a must read if you're looking for something wintry, something that is realistic and kind of thrilling in a very quiet, understated way. This is definitely one of my favorite books of the year, and I would absolutely recommend it, especially for this season. I'm going to suggest a book now that does not take place necessarily during the winter, at least not the whole thing, but I think it is a good book to read during the winter, and I wanted to give something a little bit different. So for this, I'm going to suggest My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. So if you've been on my channel, you know that I don't necessarily love this book, but like, I truly don't know how to feel about this book. It is a weird ass book. This is a literary fiction novel about a woman who is this like young, hot millennial. Her life seems to be perfect, but she's still not doing too good. So she decides, with the help of her crazy psychiatrist, to sleep for a year. She gets a ton of medication and she just kind of puts everything on hold and decides to take the year off and sleep and see if that solves everything. She's dealing with some grief, she's dealing with a toxic relationship, that kind of stuff, and just some general like millennial angst, existential angst. But the reason I think this book would be so good to read during the winter is that it is extremely isolating. It feels off, it feels a little bit wrong. I feel like this is a really good book to just sit down and like absorb during like a snow day where you're stuck inside anyways, and you just want something that makes you feel even more like miserable. Like, you want to just wallow a little bit in like the cold weather. I don't know, this book to me, like when I think of it, I think of isolation. This is someone that is purposefully isolating herself from the world, that is purposefully isolating herself from herself almost. She doesn't really want to think or reflect on anything. She really just wants to take some time for herself, but not in a healthy way. And I feel like that'd just be perfect for the winter, because the winter I find is a little bit isolating. You're less willing to go outside, you're less willing to interact with people because you don't really want to go anywhere. So I think this would be great to pick up during that time. And obviously part of this book does take place during the winter because she is sleeping for a year. Some of it happens during the winter. She lives in New York City, so it's not like winter, but it still does absolutely make you feel like kind of like uncomfortable. I'm glad to be where I am, but I'm also feeling kind of distant sort of feeling. This book does that really, really well. Because I am me and I cannot go a whole video without some fantasy, I think for the winter, Robin Hobb's books are a great pick. Now, granted, I've only read the first two in this trilogy, and that's the only one of hers I'd read, but if you are looking somewhere to start anyways with her books, this is the official starting point, so I would absolutely recommend these. I'm gonna put the other two down because I can only hold one at a time, but this is the first book in the Farseer trilogy, Assassin's Apprentice, and this is an adult high fantasy story about Fitz, who is the bastard son of the king in waiting, and his mother and her family decide to just leave Fitz with the royal family for them to take care of him, because they probably know what to do with him a little bit better, and he'll probably have a bit of a better life than just the bastard son of some village maiden. You're following Fitz as he is kind of growing up in the castle. This first book takes place over the span of like 10 years in his life, from the ages of 6 to 17, I think, or 7 to 17. So it's definitely a little bit of coming of age, but it does not read like it. And a lot of it takes place in this very harsh and hospitable world, and not in the sense of the actual world where they are, but rather Fitz's world of court politics and royal politics, and the people around him that wish to do him harm, and the people around him that love him but still like don't really treat him necessarily the best. And to me that seems very wintry, because Fitz feels a lot of loneliness and again isolation. He doesn't really know his place in the world because he's not quite royal enough to participate in full royal affairs, but he's also not quite normal enough to just be a normal boy no matter how hard he tries. The thing I absolutely love about Robin Hobb's books is her ability to make you feel for characters and her very slow but deliberate weaving of the story. So for example, Royal Assassin took me a while to get through. This book took me about 2 months to read, and I don't think that's the best way to do it. I will say right off the bat, I do not recommend doing that. I think these are really built to be books where you can sit down and read for hours rather than books you can dip in and out of, because there are some stories with like short chapters, or like maybe the plot is fairly easy to follow because there's a very linear plot. This is not that. These are books that are very focused on the characters and very slow burns. These are not books to dip in and out of. These are books though where you can sit during a wintry snowy day, curl up in front of the fireplace, curl up with a blanket, some tea, when you have nothing else planned in your day, and just sit and lose yourself. And to me, that's very much what I look for in a fantasy anyways, but especially during the winter, I don't want something kind of lighter. I want something heavy and beautiful and atmospheric. I will say a lot of scenes in here do take place in the forest in the winter, which is just immaculate in terms of the vibes. But overall, even the scenes in the summer are kind of very sad, very melancholic. You still feel for Fitz, they're very heartbreaking, and I find overall that is just so wintry to me. I just want to sit down for hours and get lost in this world and these characters, and I think if you're looking for a fantasy series to pick up during the winter, I think this absolutely should be it. It is just so beautiful and just so breathtaking, and you really should take your time with them, and I think that's beautiful about them. And I think if there's any time to do that, it is the winter when you're not going outside much anyways. The next book I want to recommend is a nonfiction book, so I want to recommend Dead Mountain by Donnie Icar. I've talked about this book a few times on my channel, but I think if I really wanted to think about books that I think are perfect to read during the winter specifically, this really comes to mind. This is a nonfiction book about the author's search for the truth of the Dyatlov Pass incident. If you're not aware of this, this is a long unsolved mystery that happened in Russia. Some college kids went for a hike and never came back, and when people went out finally looking for them, they found some pretty horrific things had happened to the kids, and people had long speculated for years, is it aliens? Is it the government? Is it the military? Who knows, right? Because of course people, when something's unsolved, it always turns to aliens. The thing I really loved about this book was you got this complete perspective of the story. So not only do you have the author traveling to Russia and completing the hike that they did himself, you also have him interviewing people that knew the kids because this didn't happen that long ago. And then you also have him painstakingly recreating minute by minute, step by step, everything the kids did until all communication and all trace of them was cut off. Because these kids were taking notes in journals, they were taking photos, they were meeting people along the way in small towns. So we were able to get a very complete picture of everything that happened those few days leading up to the disaster. This hike also happened in the dead of winter in the mountains of Russia. So you can kind of see how this would be a perfect book to read. But beyond that, this book was just kind of sad. The author did a great job of really humanizing these kids and not making them just this, some dead bodies, let's see what happens. He really did a great job of making you feel for them. You really got to see each kid's personality. You really got to see their hopes and dreams. And that made it kind of sad, but also really, really beautiful. But I think the setting is really what makes this so wintry. You are reading about them hiking and you're just feeling for them, especially again, if you read it during the winter, you're sitting there and you're like, oh my God, like I know how this is. I cannot imagine being stranded out here. The fact that it's also a mystery almost makes it kind of not spooky, but kind of tense, which I think is kind of fun to read during the winter. Like if you're not looking for something light, I don't think any of these that I've suggested were light, but if you're looking for something that's a little bit darker, but still very, I guess, respectful and nice, this is a good one because there were times that I was kind of like spooked, like thinking about what was happening to the kids. I keep saying kids, they were like college students, but in my mind they were kids because like, I don't know, no one should have happened to them what happened to them. But yeah, overall I think this is a great one if you're looking for a nonfiction book, especially if you like true crime. I think this is a really, really good one to pick up if you're looking for something during, you know, January, February, it's kind of cold, you're stuck inside and you want to breeze through something really quickly. I think this is a really, really good pick. I still think about this book quite often because I just thought it was so immaculately crafted. I thought the author did a great job, and I think for winter this is such a good one to pick up if you want to kind of be glad to be inside out of the cold and be thankful for where you are. I've got two more. The first one's like really obvious. I don't know if I have to go that in depth with it, so I'm just gonna like put it out there. The Shining by Stephen King. Listen, if you are looking for something incredibly cerebral, if you're looking for something kind of sad and isolating, this is the book. This is about a family who goes up into a hotel up in the mountains during the winter because the father got a job as a caretaker there while there are no guests. He just has to keep an eye on the hotel because no one wants to go there. Like it's all cut off from everything during the winter. So they're kind of stuck there. And of course, cabin fever sets in and they kind of go crazy, especially the dad. And because this is set during the winter, and like, damn, you feel it. You feel cold. You feel the cabin fever, the pressure, the frustration at being stuck, the isolation, the kind of slow descent into madness. And I find it's just perfect for the winter. I'm sure I'm not the only person in the world to recommend this for winter books, so I'm just gonna move past it, but I think this is one of the best ones that you possibly could read during the winter. I would recommend it over like Misery, for example, which it also takes place during the winter, at least at the beginning, and is also Stephen King, obviously, but I think The Shining did a much better job at that wintry atmosphere. Finally, I want to recommend The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. So this is a horror book, and some people might recommend this more for the fall, but I definitely got a bit more wintry vibes. I don't know if it's overall because when I think of Indigenous folk, because I live in Canada, I think of winter because I know a lot of their traditions involve winter. But for me, this book really, really read winter. Again, a lot of the similar themes of isolation and madness, and it's just a very, to me, it definitely felt more wintry, even though I don't think all of it takes place during the winter. So this is the story following a group of kids who are all grown up now, but when they were kids, they shot and killed a herd of elk, and now something is out there to take revenge. So the main story of when they were on the hunt takes place during the winter, and I think that overall, even though you don't get it at the beginning, I think it really sets the tone knowing this, that this was like a very difficult event for all of them because they did not plan on doing that, and it was not something they all wanted to do. And it was also, again, like you're cold, you're hunting, you're kind of getting this, I don't know, the imagery is so vivid that it just feels like you're there. And then if I'm not mistaken, the back half of the book takes place during a sweat lodge that happens in the winter. I might be wrong, but that's the vibe I got from it. If not, because you're stuck inside this like tiny building, sweating, trying to connect with your ancestors and trying to cleanse yourself. And then when you step out, you're like freezing because you're sweating in the sweat lodge. And to me, it was very reminiscent of, you know, when you're all warm inside, maybe you're going to a sauna and then you step outside and it's like pure winter. And to me, it was just like something about this book just screams winter to me. I also think you would just feel more immersed in the book if, again, like not when it was like spooky, but like kind of pretty outside still in the fall. I think if you're reading this during the winter and you really feel that devastation that the kids feel, their frustration, but also their fear and their isolation, because you are following two people that have moved away from the reserve where they lived, so they feel a little bit distanced from Indigenous culture. So there's a lot of different things going on in here, and I just definitely think that this would be better read during the winter. Maybe it doesn't make any sense, let me know if it doesn't, it might not, but I just think that this book is much better suited for the winter. I think it is definitely worth reading for the winter. I think if you read it during like spooky season, it might not be scary necessarily because of all of the other thematic content going on. Not like his other book, My Heart is a Chainsaw. Like that one is just like scary, it's a slasher. This one is slow, deliberate, and kind of gruesome, but still very haunting. And I think that to me makes me think winter, like hauntingly beautiful, hauntingly dark is wintry to me. I'm not saying any of this makes sense, okay? Like we know on my channel that I go off vibes. I don't really necessarily think anything through. But yeah, that was my set of winter book recommendations. Let me know if you've read any of these, if you have any more to add. I can definitely think of a few, but I know that I listed some, like I said, in the video of recs for my readathon, so I didn't want to like get repetitive. But these are some that when I think of them, having read them, I think they would be such perfect things to read during the winter, and I hope that you give some of them a try. Also, my social media is linked down below. You guys can always come talk to me there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!